The sound of metal wheels echoed softly through the narrow hallway of the Sacramento County Animal Shelter. Dawson Riker moved slowly, his fingers tight around the joystick of his motorized wheelchair. The fluorescent lights above flickered intermittently, casting pale shadows on the rows of kennels lined along the walls. Each cage held a story, most of them untold, but Dawson was there for one in particular. His breath was shallow, his throat dry, and he hadn't let go of the photo in his hand since stepping out of the van. The photo had arrived in an unmarked envelope. No note, no return address. Just a single image of a German shepherd behind rusty bars, with eyes that pierced something deep in his chest. Dawson didn't want to believe it at first. It had been over a year since the accident, since the night Sadie vanished. She'd been his K-9 partner, his shadow in the field, his family. When the patrol car flipped after a high-speed chase, Dawson had awakened in a hospital bed with shattered vertebrae, and no sign of Sadie. Now here he was rolling past the rows of barking, pacing dogs. But as he approached kennel number 47, everything else seemed to disappear. The barking quieted. His chest tightened. There she was, curled in the back corner, thinner than before, one ear slightly nicked, but unmistakably her. Sadie. Her eyes locked onto his, and for a moment, neither of them moved. Time hung still between them. Sadie, Dawson whispered, voice cracking. His fingers slipped through the bars, and slowly, cautiously, she approached. One paw reached forward, touching his hand. Her tail gave a hesitant wag, and when she pressed her muzzle against his fingers, Dawson broke down. The tears came without warning, heavy and raw. Sadie whined low in her throat, then gently licked his wrist, as if to say, "I found you too." From behind him, Lila Kensington stood silently with a clipboard in hand. She had seen reunions before, owners and lost pets rediscovering each other. But this one reached somewhere deeper. Her eyes welled up, and she instinctively took a photo, not for paperwork, but because something told her this was more than just a reunion. It was the beginning of something bigger. As Dawson rested his forehead against the cold metal of the kennel, Sadie laid down with her paw still between the bars, refusing to let go. What neither of them knew was that this unexpected meeting would unravel truths long buried. Secrets about that night, about the people Dawson once trusted, and about the cost of silence. Dawson Riker hadn't stepped inside a police precinct since the accident. Just the thought of it brought a weight to his chest that made it hard to breathe. But that evening, after leaving the shelter with Sadie by his side, something stirred in him. Not just relief, but unease. How had she ended up there? Why hadn't anyone contacted him? And who sent that photo? As he sat in his living room, with Sadie curled up by the couch like old times, 1,000 questions raced through his mind. He grabbed a worn file folder from a drawer labeled Accident, Boone. Inside were faded photos, newspaper clippings, and a half-written letter he never sent. Everett Boone had been the captain on duty the night of the crash. A man Dawson once respected, almost like a father. But after the accident, Boone retired early, stopped returning calls, and vanished from the public eye. That always felt off. Dawson didn't believe in coincidences anymore. Lila Kensington called later that night. She had pulled Sadie's intake records. The shelter had listed her as a stray, no microchip detected. That was impossible. Sadie had been chipped twice, once by the department and once personally by Dawson. "It's like someone wiped her clean," Lila said, her voice low, and she was dropped off in the middle of the night. No paperwork, no explanation. Her words were heavy with something unspoken. Dawson felt his gut tighten. Someone didn't want Sadie found. The next morning, Dawson made a call he had avoided for over a year. Harper Langley, a detective 10 years younger than him, sharp as a knife and stubborn as hell. She picked up on the second ring. "If this is about Boone," she said, "you're not the first to ask questions." Dawson paused, surprised. Harper had always been by the book, but there was something in her voice now, a flicker of doubt. She agreed to meet him at a diner on the edge of town. Before leaving, Dawson looked down at Sadie. She stood alert, as if sensing the shift in his energy. He leaned down and pressed his forehead gently to hers. "You remember something," he whispered. "I know you do." Her tail moved just once, slow and steady, like she understood every word. For the first time since the crash, Dawson felt more than just grief. He felt purpose. But as he rolled out the door, unaware of the figure watching his house from across the street, one truth settled deep in his bones. Whatever happened that night wasn't an accident, and someone was still trying to keep it buried. The diner hadn't changed in 20 years. The same squeaky red booths, same checkered floor, and the same waitress with her name tag half hanging off. Dawson Riker sat by the window, eyes scanning the street. He always chose a seat with a clear view of the exits. Old habits never died, even when your legs didn't work anymore. Sadie sat beside him, her head resting on his lap, eyes darting with every movement outside. She was restless. So was he. Harper Langley walked in 5 minutes late, coat damp from the morning fog. She looked tired, not physically, but the kind of tired that settles in when you've been carrying a truth too long. Sliding into the booth, she gave Sadie a nod. "Didn't think I'd ever see her again," she said softly. "You know," Dawson replied. "Neither did I." The silence between them wasn't cold, just loaded. She pulled out a folder and laid it on the table without opening it. "I've looked into Boone," Harper began. "After the crash, he filed for early retirement and moved out of state. The file on your accident was sealed. Internal Affairs closed it in under a week. That's not protocol, Dawson. That's a cover-up." Dawson clenched his jaw. He knew Boone wasn't clean, but hearing it aloud stung. "What about Colton Maddox?" he asked. Harper looked up sharply. "Your partner? He's clean on paper. But guess who signed off on the missing K-9 report?" Dawson didn't answer. He already knew. Outside, the morning fog had thickened. From the booth, Dawson could barely see the parking lot. Something about it felt wrong. Harper continued, her voice low. "Boone and Maddox both had access to Sadie's chip data. If someone erased it, it had to be internal." She pushed the folder toward him. "There's more in there, things I can't be tied to. You want the truth, Dawson? You'll have to dig it out yourself. But be careful who you trust." As Dawson flipped through the folder, his eyes landed on a name that hadn't crossed his mind in years. Silas McCoy, retired military, lived 2 blocks from the crash site. "He was the only civilian listed near the scene," Harper said. "But no one ever followed up." Dawson remembered the name now. Old man always on his porch. He might have seen everything that night. Dawson left the diner with Sadie at his side, folder tucked under his arm. He didn't say much to Harper, but the look in his eyes said enough. He was going to find Silas McCoy, because if there were still shadows around that night, someone had been watching from the dark. Silas McCoy lived in a small, weathered house at the end of Pine Hollow Road, a narrow street lined with oak trees that groaned when the wind moved through them. Dawson Riker remembered it from years ago, back when he and Sadie used to patrol that side of town. Silas had always been out front, sitting in the same creaky wooden chair, sipping something strong from a faded thermos. Locals called him the Last Watchman. Most didn't know much about him, just that he saw more than he let on. As Dawson pulled up in his van, Sadie barked once, low and cautious. She stayed by his side as he wheeled up the short, cracked driveway. Silas was already outside, as if he'd been expecting them. His white beard had grown longer, and his eyes, though tired, were sharp as ever. "Well, I'll be damned," he muttered, standing slowly. "Didn't think I'd ever see you again, Riker, and sure as hell not with her." Dawson didn't waste time. "You were here the night of the crash. You saw something, didn't you?" Silas didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked at Sadie, then back at Dawson. "I saw a lot of things that night," he said quietly. "Most people think I'm just an old man with a bad back and worse memory. But I remember every second." He turned and nodded toward the porch. "Come on. You'll want to hear this sitting down." Inside, the house smelled of tobacco and old wood. A wall of military medals hung behind the fireplace, and photos of long-gone friends and family covered a side table. Silas poured coffee without asking and sat across from Dawson. "That night," he began, "I was out back when I heard the crash. I saw the cruiser flip. I called 911. But before the medics arrived, another car pulled up, unmarked. 2 men stepped out. One of them took your dog." Dawson's stomach dropped. "You saw them take Sadie?" he asked, gripping the armrest of his chair. Silas nodded. "She tried to resist. Fought them. One of them tossed her. I almost ran out to stop them, but I was unarmed, and I recognized one of them, Everett Boone." The name struck Dawson like a punch to the chest. It wasn't just negligence, it was betrayal. Silas leaned forward. "You weren't supposed to survive, Dawson, and neither was she." The room felt colder all of a sudden. Sadie let out a soft growl, as if she too understood the weight of the truth being spoken. And Dawson knew in that moment this wasn't just about answers anymore, it was about justice. Dawson Riker barely slept that night. Silas McCoy's words echoed in his head like a warning bell he couldn't shut off. "You weren't supposed to survive." The betrayal cut deeper than any physical injury ever could. He had always known something didn't add up, but to hear that Boone, a man he trusted with his life, had been involved in taking Sadie, that was something else entirely. And if Boone was willing to go that far, what else had he done? By morning, Dawson was back at his old house, sitting at the kitchen table, staring at the folder Harper Langley had given him. Sadie laid nearby, eyes watching every move he made. He opened the file slowly, careful not to miss a detail. There were reports from that night, some of them redacted, others strangely vague. But one document caught his eye, a memo addressed to Colton Maddox, timestamped 3 days before the crash. It referenced a K9 extraction protocol, something Dawson had never heard of. The memo made it clear. Someone had planned for Sadie to be taken. Not after the crash, before it. Dawson's fingers clenched around the paper. He had worked side by side with Colton Maddox for 5 years. They'd faced down gang units, drug busts, and hostage situations. If Maddox was part of this, then the betrayal wasn't just professional, it was personal. He grabbed his phone and texted Harper. "Need to talk." Maddox was in on it. Later that afternoon, Harper met Dawson in the parking lot of an old storage facility just outside town. It was where Dawson used to store extra gear from his patrol days. "I found something else," she said, holding out a USB drive. "Boone's old digital logs. Someone wiped most of them, but there are fragments. Voice memos. Meetings between Boone and someone he only refers to as CM." Dawson's heart sank. Colton Maddox. They sat inside the unit, listening to the crackling audio files. Boone's voice came through, calm and calculated. "He's getting too close. The dog too. We can't risk exposure. Remove them both. Make it clean." Dawson closed his eyes, bile rising in his throat. It wasn't an accident. It was an execution order that failed. Sadie paced the floor, clearly agitated by the voices in the audio. Dawson looked at Harper. "We need proof that links Maddox directly to this." Harper nodded. "We find that, and we take it public. No more silence." But even as they spoke, Dawson noticed something strange. A red dot blinking faintly under his wheelchair. A tracker. Someone knew exactly where he was. Dawson Riker stared at the blinking red light beneath his wheelchair, a cold sweat forming on his brow. It was no larger than a quarter, but the implications were massive. He didn't say a word, just made brief eye contact with Harper Langley, then nodded toward the exit. She understood instantly. Whatever was coming, they were already one step behind. Harper casually slipped the USB drive into her coat pocket and walked out like nothing had happened. Dawson followed moments later, his pulse hammering in his ears. Back in the van, Sadie growled low, pacing the floor as Dawson pulled out his phone and snapped a photo of the tracker. He didn't remove it, not yet. Let them think he hadn't noticed. Whoever was watching was getting bold. Too bold. Harper called within minutes, her voice tense. "You think they're planning something?" Dawson didn't hesitate. "I don't think, Harper. I know. They're not just watching. They're waiting for the right moment to shut me up for good. Dawson drove straight to the only place he knew they'd be safe, Lila Kensington's house. The animal shelter worker had already become more than a bystander in all this. She greeted them with a nervous smile, eyes darting to the street. I saw a black SUV parked 2 houses down earlier. No plates. Dawson rolled past her, Sadie close behind. They know we're getting close, he said. And if we're being followed, I need to start acting like bait. That night, Dawson sat in the dark living room with Sadie at his feet, his thoughts racing. He knew Colton Maddox, knew his patterns, his tells, his pressure points. And one thing about Colton, he couldn't resist controlling the outcome. Dawson was sure Maddox had been the one pulling the strings from the shadows, cleaning up Boone's mess, or maybe creating it. But if they were tracking him now, it meant Maddox was running out of time. And patience. Lila brought in tea, her hands shaking slightly. "You're going to confront him, aren't you?" she asked. Dawson didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked at Sadie, who lifted her head and stared back, calm and loyal, as if to say, "I'm ready." He finally said, "I have to, but not without leverage." He pulled the audio file back up, listening again to Boone's voice. "Make it clean." This time he caught something new, a faint background noise. A bell, a train crossing bell. Harper texted seconds later, "I found something." Boone's last known meeting with Maddox was near an old rail yard. The audio matches. Dawson stared at the screen, heart pounding. The trap wasn't under his wheels. He was about to walk into one. The abandoned rail yard on the east side of town hadn't seen a train in over 15 years. Rusted tracks curved like forgotten scars through a wasteland of metal, weeds, and wind. Dawson Riker arrived just before sunset, the sky a dull orange bleeding into gray. Harper Langley was already there, waiting near a stack of derailed boxcars. Her coat was zipped high, and her hand never strayed far from her sidearm. "You sure he'll come?" she asked. Dawson nodded. Maddox always liked controlling the narrative. "He'll show." Sadie leapt from the van and sniffed the air, ears high, posture alert. She moved in quiet, practiced steps, instincts sharpened by years on the job. Dawson watched her, pride and pain tangled in his chest. He remembered when Sadie was just a rookie, all bark and no balance. Now she was his anchor, his last true partner. And tonight, he was willing to risk everything to make sure her truth, their truth, came to light. They set up near a control tower that overlooked the yard. Dawson uploaded the audio file and the photo of the tracker to a secure cloud, just in case. "We're past the point of no return," Harper muttered. "Once Maddox knows you have this, there's no undoing it." Dawson didn't flinch. "That's the idea." As the sun dipped lower, a black SUV rolled into the far end of the yard. One driver, one passenger. Both doors opened in sync. Dawson's breath caught. Colton Maddox stepped out wearing civilian clothes and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Riker," he called out, hands visible but loose. "Didn't expect you to still be digging around in the dirt. Thought you'd moved on." Dawson rolled forward slowly. "Funny. I thought the same about you. But here you are, back where it started." Maddox's smile faded just slightly. "You've got nothing." Dawson pulled out a speaker, played the audio. Boone's voice filled the space. Maddox didn't move. Then, quietly Maddox said, "You weren't supposed to survive that night. It wasn't anger. It was resignation." Harper's hand tightened on her weapon. Sadie let out a low growl. Dawson kept his voice steady. "You had a choice. You made the wrong one. Now everyone will know what you did." Maddox stepped forward. "No, they won't." From behind one of the train cars, a second figure emerged, face covered, holding something metallic. Harper spun around. "Gun!" she shouted. Dawson threw himself sideways as Sadie lunged. The trap had sprung, but no one knew for whom. The shot rang out before anyone could fully react. The echo bounced off the rusted metal walls like a scream trapped in steel. Dawson Riker hit the ground hard, his chair spinning out behind him. Harper Langley fired twice toward the masked gunman, missing by inches as he ducked behind a broken cargo container. Sadie didn't hesitate. She bolted toward Maddox, who had reached for something under his jacket. Maddox cursed and stumbled back, drawing a compact pistol. But before he could aim, Sadie was on him, jaws locking around his forearm, dragging him down with a force that surprised even him. The gun clattered to the gravel as Maddox screamed, trying to shake her off. "Call her off, Dawson," he shouted, panic creeping in. Dawson, lying on the cold dirt with blood trickling from his forehead, simply watched. "You had a choice," he repeated, voice like gravel. Harper moved quickly, crouching beside Dawson to check his wound. "Just a scratch," he muttered. "Get the second shooter." She nodded and vanished around the side of the train car. The air was thick with tension, sirens now audible in the distance. Someone had heard the shots. Sadie finally released Maddox, backing off with a low growl. Her eyes locked on him like she knew exactly who he was and what he had done. Dawson pulled himself back into his chair, gritting his teeth against the pain. Maddox lay panting on the ground, bleeding, face pale. "It wasn't supposed to go like this," he muttered. "Boone, he made the call. I was following orders." Dawson leaned in, eyes narrowed. "You don't get to hide behind Boone. He's dead. You're not. And you're going to tell the world what happened." Maddox laughed weakly. "You think they'll believe a crippled ex-cop and his dog?" Dawson smiled coldly. "They will when they see the footage." Harper returned, dragging the masked shooter, a young man in his 20s, clearly scared out of his mind. "He's no pro," she said, "probably paid to look dangerous. But he talked." She held up a burner phone. "This has texts. Maddox paid him to scare you, not kill." Maddox didn't deny it. He just closed his eyes. "It was supposed to end quietly," he mumbled. Dawson exhaled, gripping the arms of his chair. The silence after the chaos was heavier than the noise itself. But something had shifted. The truth was no longer buried. It was bleeding, breathing, and undeniable. And now the city would have to look it in the face. 3 days had passed since the confrontation at the rail yard, and the story had already spread beyond Sacramento. Local news outlets picked up the audio recording, then regional media, and then national headlines. Whistleblower cop in wheelchair exposes department cover-up. Dawson Riker hadn't asked for attention. He only wanted the truth. But now he was at the center of something much bigger than his own pain. Colton Maddox had been arrested on multiple charges, including obstruction of justice and conspiracy. Harper Langley had submitted her report, backed by audio, text messages, and the testimony of the hired gunman, who had agreed to cooperate in exchange for a reduced sentence. But for Dawson, none of that erased the sleepless nights, the wreckage of trust, or the time he and Sadie had lost. Justice wasn't a straight line. It was jagged and personal. Sadie lay beside him on the porch of Lila Kensington's home. The fall air was crisp, carrying the scent of pine and smoke from a distant chimney. Lila stepped outside with 2 mugs of coffee, offering one to Dawson. "You did it," she said quietly. He shook his head. "We did it. You, Harper, Silas, Sadie." He paused, looking down at the dog now dozing with her head on his foot. "I owe all of you more than I can ever say." Lila sat beside him, sipping slowly. "What will you do now?" she asked. Dawson was silent for a long moment. "There's something about truth," he said. "Once it's out, it doesn't heal you, but it gives you room to start healing on your own." He glanced toward the driveway, where a group of neighborhood kids were gathering to see Sadie. "She's a hero, you know. Everyone keeps saying I exposed the truth. But she remembered. She led me back to all of it." Meanwhile, across town, Everett Boone's name had reemerged in every article and news segment. Though long gone, his legacy was now stained, not just by corruption, but by silence. Silas McCoy had given an official statement, confirming everything he saw the night of the crash. His words, though simple, were powerful. "I kept quiet too long. This city deserves better." And with that, the final piece of the puzzle had locked into place. Dawson looked out at the horizon, the sky a soft gold. The wounds were still fresh, but the storm had passed. For the first time in a long while, he felt like breathing came easy. But even as the world around him began to move on, one final decision remained, and it would shape the rest of his life. The auditorium wasn't full, but it was enough. Former officers, community members, families, and a few kids wearing plastic badge stickers sat quietly as Dawson Riker rolled to the center stage. The city had invited him to speak at the unveiling of the new K9 Memorial Wall, a tribute not just to dogs lost in service, but to partnerships built on loyalty and sacrifice. Sadie walked beside him, calm and proud, her coat freshly brushed, a small medal hanging from her collar. The mayor said a few words first, then Harper Langley, but all eyes turned to Dawson when the microphone adjusted to his height. He looked out over the room, cleared his throat, and began. I spent a long time believing silence was survival, that if I kept my head down and swallowed the pain, I'd eventually forget it. But the truth doesn't go away. It waits. And when it comes back, it asks one question. What kind of person are you now? He paused, eyes landing on Sadie. This dog, she didn't just serve beside me. She saved me, more than once. And even when everyone else turned their backs, she never stopped trying to get home. She remembered who she was. When I forgot who I was, there was no dramatic music, no applause yet, just stillness, because everyone in that room felt the weight of what he said. The truth had come home. After the ceremony, Lila Kensington found Dawson outside, near the statue of a K9 unit in full stride. You know, she said gently, they're offering you a position, civilian consultant. You'd train new officers, new dogs. Dawson looked at her for a long time, thoughtful. I've spent so long chasing ghosts, he said. Maybe it's time I help someone else chase something better. Sadie barked once, as if in agreement. That settled it. Weeks later, Dawson and Sadie moved into a small house on the edge of town. Quiet, with a fenced yard and space to breathe. Harper visited sometimes. So did Silas, now more open than ever. The city began to heal, slowly, learning from its wounds. And Dawson, he wasn't chasing the past anymore. He was building something new, one quiet step at a time. One evening, while training a young officer and her rookie K9, Dawson watched them run drills across the grass. Sadie lay beside him, head tilted, tail wagging softly. You ready to retire? He whispered. She licked his hand once, then rested her head on his leg, content. For the first time in years, Dawson Riker gave a command not out of duty but out of peace. Good girl, Sadie. We're finally home.